When I was asked to do the 11 o'clock worship sermon at Miller Farm on the 100th anniversary of the Great Disappointment, we changed it now because of the prolific writer on this campus, the Great Appointment, we must call it now. I remarked that William Miller might have been surprised at whom it was they chose to be the divine worship speaker. I said that with tongue in cheek because the fact is that the Millerite movement had some outstanding African American preachers, and some of you, I hope, are aware of that. But it is kind of different, you know. Last night I was thinking about that as I was going along. I learned how to adapt my style to different audiences. I think it is the greatest, it is the quintessence of arrogance to say I will always be the same, because audiences change and you've got to change the way that you address them. But since I've started doing Breath of Life, I have the luxury of being authentically African American whenever I want to be. And I was thinking, I wonder what HMS Richards would say if he were seated in the audience last night. I don't know. You know, I've been around Elder Richards. I spent some time with him, and I know that he believed in exuberant preaching, so I think maybe he had a little twinkle in his eye last night. Let's start with what I've got to do always when I talk about how you ought to preach better. You cannot go without saying that preaching is not performing. If you don't understand what I'm about to say real fast, then you'll miss the point. If there is in the center of every authentic communicator of the gospel some inspiration, and I do not intend to symbolize any theological point by this, please. So don't get too deep with it. Don't write your dissertation on it. But if that is so, I am not trying to do this to embellish to the outside world to become something that appeals to everyone. Because I sincerely believe that the most successful communicator will be the most converted and authentic Christian. If I were a conference president and if I could know that one candidate for ministry was a converted Christian with fair to normal skills, and if another were completely charismatic but hypocritical, I would always take the Christian. Because in the end, this stuff won't work. People will discover that that's not real. What I want to try to do is to remove what I think is a blocking system that we have learned from our awareness of what we know about Ellen White's writings and what we've learned from our early Methodist upbringing. We learned to be a certain way, and some of it is not biblical. You understand what I'm saying? Some of what we are, we don't teach on a conscious level. We transmit subliminally. So what I'm trying to do is get rid of this stuff. Because I think that if you allow Christ in you to communicate through you, you will be effective. I believe if you've got a lot of gobbledygook in your head that says, I can't do that, then you cannot really let Christ shine out, which is what he's trying to do. He's trying to shine out. The text says, let your light so shine. Didn't say make your light shine. You don't have to make light shine. You just let it. If it's in you, you let it. But if you got all this extraneous material floating around in there. We've got to be careful. We've got to, Now, I'll tell you where mine came from. I finally identified it when I was at the White Estate. A whole lot of it came from what people told me Ellen White said. Poor Ellen White. If people would just read what she said instead of listening to what somebody said she said, this woman could be very popular. In fact, from this very campus, Ellen White's writings are on the internet. And while I was at the White Estate, we made that decision. I'm real proud of that. In fact, I could almost say, if you didn't look at it real hard, that while I was there, but we decided to let Ellen White's writings be put on the internet. It was really a difficult decision for us to make because the White Estate is not known traditionally for being that proactive. We are known as holding, the vault and manuscript releases. If we check you out and we're sure who you are, we will release something to you. Well, that paradigm is changing. I'm happy to tell you that the new director, and in fact, the former director, came to understand that we're not about holding the truth, we're about letting the truth go. And when they finish the next CD-ROM, or the edition, everything that Ellen White ever wrote will be on the ROM. So you can get it all. And the last decision we made, let me see, should I say this on tape? Yeah. I don't work there anymore. The last decision we made, there was a letter that Ellen White wrote to a trusted friend about some problems that she and James were having. And after Ellen White died, the woman sent the letter back to the White Estate. You gotta be careful what you write, kids. Okay. So then we had possession of it, but it said, there was every intent expressed. I don't ever want this to be known. So we had to decide: do we protect her by not publishing the letter, by not putting it on the ROM, or do we let it go in the interest of having everything out there? Because the accusation Ellen White Estate gets all the time is, you got more than you're letting out. You're holding stuff. So we decided to put it on there. So whenever it comes out with the unpublished writings, even that little letter that says that Ellen and James had a problem is going to be on there. So, my point is that if you would read everything she said, and of course that's difficult because she wrote a lot. But instead of getting what somebody says she said, even me, when I put my little quotes up here, and when you read what I will put down here, I've got a document I'll pass out to you eventually. Read around it. If you don't believe what I said, go read around it. And guess what? You'll find that in Ellen White's writings there's a balance. Now, what they told me was, Ellen White said, no jesting, no joking, no preaching. If you went through Ellen White's writings and found out how many times she said we should spend less time sermonizing and anything you want to think. Less time sermonizing and less time sermonizing. I've come to believe that when Ellen White used the word sermonizing, she was not talking about what she did when she was in the pulpit. I think she was talking about what people do when they fake communicate, put on all those affectations. When I was at Oakwood, I'm telling secrets now, but we used to take a hymnal. There was a part of the dormitory that we called the Vatican. And we would, if you went down there, you would hear something like this. Preachers, budding homileticians walking down the halls. Rescue the perishing. Care for the dying. Search not them. You know what I mean. If you don't have the truth, you can make a lie pretty and it doesn't help anybody. It really doesn't. So we were on the periphery of understanding communication. But the fact is that the delivery system is not nearly so important as what you deliver. So what I want to say to you today, it must be understood before we get into technical things. Number one, I believe that a consecrated heart is the greatest tool for communicating the gospel. Give me a boring, monotonous, consecrated communicator, and I'll go with that one every time over the one with the silver tongue, but the shadowy heart. Because in time, the power of the Holy Spirit will overcome the charismatic, obvious one, and you will see more happen because of the heart than because of the tongue. Are we together on that? Now, the other thing I must say to you is this. When you get my little document in your hands, I want to tell you what it is. It says it's an alternate view. That's what it is. In other words, I know what they told me, and for about 5 or 6 years, I was limited in my preaching because people would say, you mustn't do that. Sister White says you mustn't do that. You must not tell amusing stories. I know a million amusing stories. And I would, I'd say, oh, I can't tell that, I can't tell that, I can't tell that. Okay, I got to be boring. I can be interesting, but Ellen White says I got to be boring. So, there I was, like running in a vat of molasses because of what they told me she said. What I discovered is that she did say that, but she also said some other stuff. So what I'm going to give you today is the other stuff. And if you take what they told you and what I tell you and put it both in the computer and let God work it through the matrix of your personality, you're liable to come out being the best you can be, which is what we're trying to get. What do you say? Now that we got that, we can make it. Let's do some overview stuff, because I'll tell you something, whether you know it or not, while we were here studying, the market has changed. Okay? And I'm telling you, all those little things we tell ourselves, like, don't worry about those guys out there, those dynamic preachers, don't worry about them, because they don't have the truth. Well, but they got a Bible. And they read it. In fact, some of them read it better than we do, because we think we know. We think we know before we get there the truth that's in there. So we read it like on the fly. The Evelyn Wood method. Because we don't need to read it, we got it. These people, because they come without knowing, read every word. There's a guy on television, and if you haven't seen him, you may have been in an alternate universe. His name is Bishop T.D. Jakes. Okay, somebody's heard about it. This guy reads the Bible. Every little word of it. He did something the other day that made me mad because I didn't do it. He said that when Jesus was at Lazarus' tomb, Jesus did not have to say, Lazarus of Bethany, whose sisters are Mary and Martha, come forth. He didn't have to say, Lazarus, who is my friend, you and I have been friends a long time. Any other Lazaruses in there, I'm not talking to you. I'm expanding now. He said all Jesus had to do was go down there and say, Lazarus, come forth. And the right Lazarus got up. Which is to say that if God's got a blessing for you, he doesn't have to identify you on a website. All he got to do is say, this is yours. And I thought about that. Why didn't I think of that? That's some good preaching. Jesus' blessings are specific. You don't have to worry if somebody else is going to get your blessing. You don't have to worry somebody else is going to get your job. He said, being more to the point. What God has for you, nobody else can have. Because his blessings are specific. Now, Jake said that because he read that text more analytically than I did, because I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I don't have to read that. Not that deeply, because I already know it. I know what Lazarus means. Lazarus is another point in our proving the state of the dead. It's anecdotal evidence on the side of our position on the state of the dead. So I don't have to analyze Lazarus come forth. I already know it. So I don't have to look at it. Jakes doesn't think he knows it, so he reads it. Every word, every syllable goes back to the original language. And incidentally, somebody came to me last night and said this, and I want to emphasize it. Sometimes preachers give you the impression that if you got God, you don't have to study. Disabuse yourself of that thought, because people are really tired of this bland overview stuff. They really are. And you can do it a couple of ways. You know, you can come with now today you can do that, and they're sick of that, and they're sick of the high decibel level non-content stuff. They're tired of non-content because in this postmodern era, they no longer worship at the shrine of possessions. They worship now at the shrine of information. Come on, wake up and smell the poster. There's been a paradigm shift. Information is king. So in an information-intensive society, you can believe that when you stand up with old stuff not even warmed over, it's not going to happen, because the people in the audience is now, oh, you got a few of those little saints who have read already. You know, I went to one church where the people were excited all the time. I'd get up and make announcements, and they would, amen. I asked one of my elders, I said, what's wrong with these people? He said, Pastor, these folk read the Bible, they have a hard time, they stick with Jesus all week long. They don't care what you say, they're just excited when they come. You can get up there and read from the yellow pages. Amen. These folk got them, they got Jesus already. They really don't need you. So you got some folk like that, but then you've got this new post-64 generation. You know, they're not going to start off with the amen. They're not even going to start off being interested. They're going to start, what you got? Let me see what you got. And whatever manner you do it, you got to bring it in there, okay? So here's the other thing you got to watch out for. Attention span has changed because this generation came up watching television. The people at the water department, put your analytical brain on now, because I can't be too specific. They're taping this, and they'll take it to some genteel society, and they'll hate me if I don't say this right. The people at the water department can tell when commercials come on. Nudge your neighbor if they don't get this yet. That's your attention span. Okay? In their minds, people in the church, every 6 to 8 minutes are saying it. They're trying to get you off and get somebody else on. Huh? That's what they do at home. They channel surf. So when the commercial comes on here, if they don't have picture in picture, and they watch 2 at a time. Now, I went to a guy's house the other day. He had one that was spread, how many channels? Nine channels across the big screen. He can look at 9 channels at the same time and then pick out one and hit it, and then go back to the 9 and then pick out another one and hit it. You know, this is the guy you're trying to preach to on Sabbath. Eh? And every 6 to 8 minutes, a commercial comes on. And I will tell you this, you can almost chip this one in stone. Go for 9 minutes without some significant change, and you're off. He can't do it, but he's doing it in his head. How come I can't get him off? Still there. Huh? Especially men, men, that's how you know when you go into a house, the man of the house has the controllers, I went to one guy's, I got 4 of them. Controllers, I got them all here in a little stand. Control stereo with this, got television with that, got this, turn them all on. When we turn that music up, turn that television down, I can do that for you. I said, man, this guy's living the life, isn't he? And amazingly, I was into it. I wanted to sit in his chair with his controllers. I kind of liked it, Drapes open up. Stereo. But we are in a control world where the person in the pew is accustomed to seeing something happen every 6 to 8 minutes. So you come on in there and get monotone. All right. So 6 minutes they give you. But round 7, they're thinking about whatever they do on Sabbath afternoon. And it gets kind of interesting. I'm not going to get into that. That's not the... They're thinking microwave at home. You know what I mean? This is so the market has changed. Now, if you don't know that, and if you think you're going to be able to just take the truth, notwithstanding what I've said, remember, the Holy Spirit can override it. Holy Spirit override. Override it. If your heart is right with God, God can perform the miracle of making all of this nothing. Because he can make somebody who sounds boring capture the attention of people who would normally be gone in 9 minutes. But the question is, are you close enough to Jesus to get Holy Ghost override? Just because God allows power to pass through you does not prove that you are acceptable to God. Since Jesus left this earth, God has been constrained to deal with imperfect people. And based on your obedience level, says the Bible, says the Spirit of prophecy, is the ability of God to use you. And none of us, I'm afraid to announce to you, is in complete surrender to God. If you were in complete surrender, then God could use you totally. And you could be as boring as the day is long, as dry as the hills of Gilboa. And your words would fall like pearls. But if you are not in total surrender to God, and you are boring, I rest my case. So what we're trying to do is, let's look at the other side of this. Let's flip the coin over. Now give me a person who is dedicated unreservedly to God, who also understands how to communicate. So the Apostle Paul can say all day long, I determined to know nothing among you save Jesus and him crucified. So what did you do, Paul? Forget what Gamaliel taught you? No. Come on, think about it. Paul was not talking about forgetting, even though he used that word that translates forgetting. He simply means I have put Christ in a priority position in my life so that I don't try to communicate what I learned as peripheral issues. My goal is to communicate Christ. But he could not put aside all those tools that he had gathered, all of those skills that he had acquired. His skills communicate to us through his works. And when you read the Pauline epistles, tell me that you don't feel the sharp mind of Paul. So if you think that you can come to this task, the way you will read it in my little document is that if you are going to communicate for Christ, you must study to put away every defect. What are the defects that keep you from communicating Christ well? And that becomes a study. Okay, now we got a background. Let's shock them. Well, we won't shock them early. We got some nice warm and fuzzy quotes first. Even though Ellen White says, less sermonizing and more visitation, less sermonizing and more work in the community, less, everything she says. She says, and I didn't put the quote here because it's in the document, the preaching of the word is not to be undervalued. And God's appointed means of saving souls is through the foolishness of preaching. She goes on to say, I think it's before that, that if there's somebody who cannot be reached by a preacher, then God will reach them in another way. But the appointed means of God communicating the gospel is through the foolishness of preaching. So don't misunderstand Ellen White. My take on it is that sermonizing is something else. You have to decide for yourself. I believe that when she uses that word sermonizing, she is categorizing something other than appropriate, effective preaching of the gospel. That's my take on it. But regardless of that, she does in fact say that that's his appointed means. God makes them channels for the outflowing of the highest influence in the universe. Now, if God inspired her, and we won't get into that long discussion, but if God inspired her, and if God intended for us to believe this, then what does that mean about all of those commercials between football games where somebody will pay $1 million for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever? So you're saying then that I can have a power that's greater than that? I don't know. What do you think? I believe that based on your concept of your power, you will decide how to communicate the gospel in a pulpit. Stick with me now. We're going ethereal now. Okay? Your concept of what you mean in the stream of time will determine how you behave yourself standing in a pulpit. If you think yourself to be inconsequential, then you will behave as though you are inconsequential and thus become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I like that. You're quiet. That means you might be thinking about that. So you're up saying, oh, this is nothing. You know, I gotta get this over with so we can go and do potluck. And this is not an ethnic thing anymore. Everybody now does potluck, okay? Much to my dismay. I think potluck is bad luck, but I mean, so you determine. Now, watch this. I believe that what you think about what you mean in the stream of time, in the flow of incidents that control or that represent what life is all about, what you think you represent not only controls the way you act, but communicates to the people who hear you. So give me enough preachers who think they don't matter, and I will give you a generation of believers who are convinced that they don't matter. And people will start saying, let's not have so much preaching, let's sing more. Trying to wait for the walls to say amen on that. Give me something that counts. Now, I travel enough to hear enough. See, people won't tell you stuff because you're there. And there's some stuff they don't tell me because I left. But they tell me some stuff about what's happening there because I'm going to leave. And in a few situations now, I am being told, Pastor, the reason why we sing a lot is because this music means something. That preaching, it's not helping anybody. So, I got a little disturbed. I went to a certain place. I'll never tell you where it is. And they had me for 12 minutes. I don't usually do that in 12 minutes. William Augustus Jones, who is kind of a friend of mine now, says that some preachers are like helicopters. They can go straight up and come straight down. Others are like 747s. They need a little runway. I tend to be more on the 747 style. I need a little runway. But 12 minutes. I said, is that all I got? They said, that's it. So I sat there and listened to them sing for an hour and 45 minutes. I'm sure it was that much, may have been 2. Then I got up and did 12. I said, Lord, help me to do the best 12 I've done in recent times. So for 12 minutes, I tried to pull the kingdom of heaven closer to the earth. Excuse me, but that's what I ask for sometimes. So next night, they went to the people who ran the thing and said, give him a little more time. So a guy comes to me and says, could you do 20? Yeah, I could do 20. Next night, I said, Lord, give me the best 20 I ever had. Lean over and kiss the earth in 20 minutes. Next night, the guy comes to me, could you do 30? I could do 30. By Sabbath, they told me, would you take all the time you want? Now, that sounds self-serving, but let me get back to the real point. I had people come to me and say, Pastor, if you would just tell the folks to deal with our needs and the Word of God, we would quit the singing, because what we want is to be inspired. But if the preaching won't inspire us, then we'll take music that does. Okay, now I know I'm on something now. You may not know it yet, but I can tell you that there is a grand shift out there. People want to sing. And they'll tell you, Pastor, can you take 12 minutes? They really will. And you say, but I can't communicate in 12 minutes. They say, well, that's all you got. And actually, what they gave you was pretty good. They gave you 2 commercial breaks. They're very generous. We'll trust you for 2 commercial breaks, all right? And if you haven't done it by then, you're gone. You're out of here. So if you believe that you got the power, well, you put the other one up. So you shocked them now. That's why you were quiet. You read that, didn't you? What do you think about that first one? Now, that's against what they told me. In fact, that's the opposite of what they told me. Because they said, you can't be up there entertaining the people. And I agree with that. But you tell me that Jesus, watch this, folks. I've been to the little place now. You remember where Jesus spoke, getting ready to get into the boat, where they were going to face the storm? It's an amazing place. Do you know the acoustics in that place are strange? I don't know whether the acoustics are good because Jesus chose the place or that they were good and that's why he chose the place. But I stood where Jesus was probably standing. Some of you have done that, haven't you? And talked, and people could hear me way back. It was amazing, you know. So either because Jesus was there, the acoustics decided to change. You know, see, some of you folk can't get your mind around that, but you know, that's the power of my Jesus. Jesus standing out there, acoustics say, hey, you know who that is, don't you? Yes, say, I'm going to change. I'm going to let him be heard. Or Jesus chose a place where, you know, the acoustics were good. But when you think about it, if people in your church were looking out on a lake while you were preaching, how would you do? You know, I do bad enough with them looking at the back of the church. Can you imagine your whole congregation? You're standing here, and behind you is a lake with fishermen out there and all kinds of enterprise going on, and you got to hold their attention. So you're going to tell me that Jesus was boring? Nah, he may not have been animated. He may not have gone about it like I do because I came from a different background than he did. But whatever he said riveted their attention. Are we together? It may have been content. It may have been, I tell you something that moves me. I got a couple preachers. I can't call their names because people misunderstand, so I can't do that. But I think that the power of sincerity supersedes every other power. There's a friend of mine who has won hundreds of souls, and if I brought him and stood him up here right now, If you didn't give him a chance, you'd say, oh, see, he's boring. But if you gave him about 2 minutes, he'd have you. Because he has an infectious, enthusiastic sincerity. And you believe that he believes. And it catches you. You don't know what to do. You're locked in. And that translates beyond any barrier. It'll catch you. So I'm telling you, the power is not all. See, don't try to make yourself. I'm not trying to make you an African American preacher if you're not one. You be who you are, but just be a better you. So take these false barriers down. Let your sincerity show. Most people now, we've gotten into all these traps, so we are afraid to be sincere. We put on a strained disingenuousness because it's what we do. Oh, that's how they train me. You better get real. Your professor's not going to be there when you hit that church. You will not have help. It'll be you, Jesus, and your pride will be, it's amazing. Your pride gets all caught up in it. It shouldn't. When I won my first 100 souls, in the African American church, the proof of the pudding is your first 100. You know that, don't you? Haven't you heard? Well, some of you, you don't even think that way because nobody's winning hundreds, so you don't even aim at it. But in the African American church, until you won 100 people at one time, you're not an authentic preacher. So all your life you're saying, Lord, give me that 100. You'll baptize anybody to give you the children. So I had got my first 100, and I'll tell you, I did it in the authentic way. I didn't baptize any folks over again and count them. I would not let my children be baptized. So I did it the old-fashioned way. I earned it, and I was feeling pretty good. And the next year, the president told me to go to a little town where they had a big tornado, I think. Yeah, tornado in Ohio. And it had torn the place apart. So here I come out there after my first 100, so I'm, I feel like I weigh a ton now. Evangelist. You walk different after the 100. We used to call them centurions. I'm a centurion. So I walk in there with my big centurion badge on, and start preaching. We got about 100 people under my tent. And one night the wind started blowing, So I did what every evangelist would do. I came closer to the mic and in a calm, authoritative voice, I said, don't you know that Jesus still a storm that is worse than this? But I was watching the people, and their reaction was not what it should have been. So I did what every preacher knows to do. I stepped poetically to the side of the podium and said, you must know, poetic pause, you must know that Jesus is able. The folks' eyes were getting wider and wider. Just about that time, ingloriously, the back of the tent platform hit me across my shoulders. That's why their eyes were getting bigger. It was boom, so it hits me. I must tell you that my wife was not there that night, so you'll understand what I'm about to say. Everyone got up and ran. The only person who stayed in the tent was the Methodist organist, and she told me afterwards that the only reason she stayed is because she wouldn't want a Seventh-day Adventist to think that she was more afraid of a storm than I was. My Bible counselors, my trusted supporters, all that I could see was the bottoms of feet. And for 5 more weeks, I told the folk, if anybody comes here to hear the gospel, I'll preach. If one comes, you gotta be careful what you say. I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of the story. But after the big 100, now I got one drunk. And he shows every night. Yeah. And I'm up there preaching. And my people, Pastor, look, we believe in you. You don't have to prove this. Please, elder. Look, take this tent down. How you going to baptize somebody? All you got is him? You can't baptize. You're not thinking of baptizing him, are you? Five weeks later, on the Sabbath morning of the baptism, the only one with me now is my wife and one Bible counselor and the Methodist organist. I'm up preaching and calling for an appeal. A car drives up from the last meeting where I baptized 100, and 3 people get out who did not get baptized the last time. Another car pulls up, and 2 people get out who didn't get baptized last time. I got 5 people sitting in front of me who did not get baptized last time, but who know all the truth. When I got to the end of my appeal, 5 people got up to be baptized. What's God trying to tell me? Forget about all that extraneous stuff. God is in control. Okay? Get it? You cannot let your emotions control you. Getting high should not get you too excited, or low should not get you too depressed, because this is not your work, this is God's work. And if you let your genuine converted self do what your genuinely converted self wants to do, okay? Most of you in here are men, and some of the women have now gotten into this fever, so I can tell this story. You go find an automobile on sale for a price that's too low. And after you have bought one, you will tell everybody you love. Right? My wife is different. If she finds a sale, my wife has learned how to go to the big stores where they play a live piano. Right, ladies? If you go into a store where somebody sitting at a piano is playing, you should not be there. You should take your ministerial salary and go somewhere else. But that means that you're in highbrow shopping country, okay? So my wife has learned to go to those places, go to the sale rack. You get better quality in the big store. See, the lady is nodding her head. You know that too, huh? So sometimes we go to places where we don't belong, you know, and I know that radar thing where the people know that I shouldn't be there. They're saying, poor, he's poor, he shouldn't be here. Poor people are here, you know. But we go to the sale place, and Sandy will find stuff that it's unbelievably good, but it's on the sale rack. The first thing she does when we get out of there is to call her buddies. Go down to Neiman Marcus. Go down to Nordstrom's. You won't believe what they got on sale down there. The natural reaction to finding an unbelievable deal after you have taken advantage of it. You don't tell anybody until you have taken advantage of it. Amen, somebody. But as soon as you have taken advantage of it, your natural reaction is to tell your friends. I believe that the natural reaction of a preacher who has studied deeply into the truth is to tell somebody, and to tell them with enthusiasm. There's a library down in Marietta, Georgia. If I went there today, the people at the library desk would say, oh no, there he is again. We thought you were gone. Because I would go to that library, have all my tools. I've already been through my Bible now, and I'm down there now shopping for illustration, shopping. You know, I got a sermon I'm getting ready to preach again. I've redone my eagle sermon. You know, the cassettes killed me on that one. You gotta be careful. You preach a good sermon, the cassettes will go, and if you go try to preach somewhere else, people's mouths will be moving along with you because they. So I'm redoing my eagle sermon. But anyway, the first time I did it, I'm down there with a table spread out with books on eagles. I'm trying to find some, why did the Lord say, as the eagle stirreth a nest? Why did he choose to make himself a female eagle? All right, put that in your little old pipe and smoke it. That's bad metaphor. So I got my stuff spread out, and many times I would find the thing I was looking for. I found out that what happens is that those eagles are in pairs, and they're happy-go-lucky. There are times, the writer said, when they'll fly up in the air so far, they look like a black speck against the sun, and then they just turn around and dive, and they look like they're going to plummet into the ground, and all of a sudden they spread those big, powerful wings and just go off to the side because they can. But then when they're planning to have eaglets, they change their behavior. So, you learn something about God and all this stuff. And when I would find it, I would forget I was in the library. I'd say, wow! And they come over there and say, excuse me, Pastor, this is a library. I'm sorry. I found something that was good, Excuse me. Well, see, you can't tell me just because you're Caucasian and from Minnesota that you don't get excited, because I've seen you at a hockey game. Don't bother me. I know what I'm talking about. And then you come and say, well, no, not at church. See, at church. But your natural reaction to discovering the truth, when you see the love of Jesus, when you understand the cross, wow! When I read the other night about Jesus looking at Peter in Pilate's judgment hall. And when Peter's eyes caught Jesus' eyes, and Peter was condemned in his own heart, but Jesus' eyes had no condemnation. Ah! Woo! So don't tell me. Oh, no, see, my culture, in my culture, we don't do that. I was over there in England where y'all came from. Where all y'all came from. And I was near a stadium, Wembley. Folks scream, holler, tear the place down. And I'm saying, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. All I'm saying to you is, why is it that when that spark happens, all this extraneous stuff says, no. Can't get excited. Give me tame, formal discourses, having them very little of the vitalizing. Go to this other. Why do you go to the people with your heart as cold as an iron wedge? Oh, I love that one. That lady could write, couldn't she? And expect to win souls. Give me that next one. I think the next one is one that's going to do it. Yeah, here it comes. You read it. See, you didn't know that was there, didn't you? I found that one day at the White Estate. And when you go to the White Estate, it's real quiet. When I first went there, I asked them, I said, do you folks, are you like that all the time? They said, yes, we try to show respect. I said, well, why are you so like? Well, it's the documents. I said, well, I got a question for you. If you're so quiet around these documents, how about if there's a Bible in the room? Oh, I thought about that. Well, when I found that one, they heard me all down the hall. Ah, look at that! That's in the spirit of prophecy, folks. Isn't that amazing? Give me the next one. Some of these folks got to go to class. And let me give you this. I will give you something to sing about while you're going. No, let's see. The next one. Yeah, that's the last one. Yeah, don't be mad at him. He's doing this for free. Isn't this shocking? I'm just shocked. Now, I want you to go and check the context because I may be fooling you. You know, I may be doing that thing to you. So go check. I'll give you the document. You can check it. Go get on the CD-ROM. Look all around it. Make sure that this is what she meant. Because she might mean that that's what some people do, but we are not involved in that. But check it out. Okay, I think I want one more. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. If you haven't had it happen. See, I believe angels would be way better at preaching. I do. But there are only two kinds of angels. There are the angels who are doing wrong and are not going to stop. And there are the angels who have never fallen and don't understand what it is to be picked up. Neither of those make good preachers. God can't use an angel who won't come on the right side. He could use an angel that has never fallen, but there's a certain power in being able to say, I was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Okay? So that's where it is. Okay, you folk who got to go, I understand. They told me not to take it personally when you got up and left. Enjoy your next class and think on these things. Oh, yeah, that's right. I need to give you a handout, don't I? Can you trust me till this afternoon? I'll keep them. I won't give anybody one until this afternoon. Hey, we're going to be alone here in a minute, kids.
For those who have a spiritual formation class, the others are welcome to stay. Elder Pearson has a few more things to share here. Standing in the back behind that. Okay. Yes, let's see. How much time do you think you have?
Well, let's do question and answers now. Okay, folk, I'll tell you what I want to do now, so we'll be fair to everybody. Let's do some question and answers. Okay? Would you do me a favor and come closer? I might stop using the mic. Well, can I stop using the mic? Okay, no. They say I shouldn't. Would you mind moving up a little bit? And we'll do a little shop talk. I don't want to be unfair to those who had to leave, but, you know, we can, for the next 30 minutes, we can do some shop talk. Now, what I hope you're hearing, and the reason why I was very careful to start off the way I did, is because I don't want you to think that anybody has given you wrong information. You understand what I mean? Tell you what I found out at the White Estate. I told them I'd work free for them for the rest of my life. They didn't ask me for it. This is not a great erasing system, is it? Everybody knows compilations, right? You know what a compilation is. Let's say that you gave Let me see. Let me try to get I'm trying to get somebody who is in a disparate, not desperate, disparate, a different background. Who's the most different person in this room? I agree with you right off the top. Okay. Where are you from? Seattle. That kind of makes you a little different. Yeah. Let's say I ask you to go through the writings of Ellen White and bring me something on parenting. You got any kids yet? Okay. Give him a few weeks. Okay. If I let him, and I'm just picking out something out of the blue now, but I want you to see how the person who does the compiling affects what you get in the compilation. Now, they will not, at the White Estate, let you put your name on a compilation. Do you know why, incidentally? They only put the name of dead people on those books because they know now that that person lived a successful life and is dead, and they can't do anything bad. Otherwise, if they put somebody's name on a book and then 2 weeks later they apostatize, we have just ruined the book. Did you know that? I was shocked to hear that. I didn't know they were that pragmatic. They said we're careful. We don't put anybody living. We don't put their name down there. This is the compiler, because then the guy goes amok, and now they got a book with his name on it. Everybody says, "Yeah, we're gonna read that for sure." Maybe like that. So you don't know who did it, and most of the time you don't even understand the process. And in fact, for a long time, they didn't worry about the balance of what Ellen White said. Now let me run that by you. It's important to understand. On the subject of wedding bands, that's a good one. Ellen White may have said this much against and this much that sounds pretty affirmative for me. But if I want to wear a wedding band, I'll take my quote from here. You got me? So there may be over there. I'll take mine from here. And you'll read the book and say, I see. Ellen White was for that. Now, what you discover about Ellen White, and I had to be in the leisure experience of being able to just kind of drink in what she says. A lot of what Ellen White wrote, she wrote to individuals. Okay? So, let me take these two guys. Let's say this guy right here is lazy. Are you lazy? I don't want to be saying anything bad about you. Okay. Are you? Okay. Let's say he's lazy. And he won't get up in the morning. He just, after about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he goes out and visits maybe one person 1 day a week. And then he doesn't prepare a sermon. Ellen White writes a letter to this guy and says, don't pause to eat, brother. Don't visit your parents. Don't do it. You work. And many times Ellen White would use figures of speech that could be misunderstood. Now, this guy right here works all the time. So she says, you must, no matter what, you must stop working and you must dedicate more time to yourself and to your family. Okay, she wrote to those two individuals. Now, we come along and do a thing that has a great intent. We say, let's take those things that Ellen White said to people, and let's pull them into a body of work. Let's let them speak to everybody. But what you got to understand is that Ellen White said stuff on both sides of most issues because she was writing to individuals. So it's possible if you don't read all the books, and folks, if you read all the books, you are amazing. I didn't read all the books, and I worked with the White Estate. That's a lot of books. So then the question comes, how can you be most true to what she actually said? Now, it's interesting. I was at the White Estate when a book called Pastoral Ministry was conceived. So they assigned me, because I had the most pastoral experience, to be the representative of the White Estate to that book. It's a powerful field. So now I have the imprimatur prophet. It's not a book until Walt says it's a book. And really, that's what they say. Walt, you look at the book, you read the manuscript, you find out if there are any weak spots in it, you point them out to us, we make decisions, and we will not say that it's a book until it's a book, and you're the guy who has charge. Well, at the end of that process, I moved from the white estate to the ministerial department, who was writing the book. So when I got to ministerial, they said, hey, Walt, since you were at white estate, you're the guy over the book. Now, why don't you put a couple things in the book? You know? So that's one book I kind of had a little something to do with. Floyd Brzee, one of the most competent pastors and writers and administrators I know, did the research for me. And what Floyd Brzee did was something that I believe is unique. He actually looked at the whole body of work and decided to try and make what he put in the book reflect the balance of what she said. Makes sense to me, doesn't it? So if 70% of what she said was you need to rest, and 30% of what she said was you need to go work, he tried to reflect the body of work in the quotations that were in the compilation. And I respect him for that intent. Now, it's impossible to make it exact, of course, but I think that was a good way to go at it, because if not, then you end up reflecting what I think. Now, I have told you up top, when you get effective preaching is what I call it. When you get that, I confess up front that it is an alternate view. So I am not saying to you that anybody who ever told you anything different is a liar. That is pedantic foolishness. Because the fact is that Ellen White teaches a balance. I say it early in this paper. And incidentally, I just let the quotes go. But they are quotes that I have chosen because, for me, they represented the other side of what information had come to me in a barrage. And if I had listened to what other people said to me about what Ellen White said, I would have not ever been as effective in communicating the gospel as I am, and I'm not merely where I want to be now. But I had to understand what Ellen White is saying. Now, this afternoon, I'm going to get just a little into the issues of what kinds of stories does Ellen White actually mean you can tell. Okay? You saw up there, she says, bring animation into your preaching. Now, come on. Animation? That is completely opposite what I was taught. Opposite of what I was taught. How about you? I don't know. Have things changed? They told me, look, you. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong, and I'm not saying discount the other side. I'm just saying look at the whole thing. That's all I'm saying. Because I'll tell you what, I've discovered as I've traveled around the world, in the United States, we start thinking that the United States is the world. And it's amazing. There's a whole other world out there, kids, way beyond the borders. And what you come against is cultures. For instance, in Indonesia, I'm preaching to people who look just like me, but who don't respond at all. In fact, they told me when I went there, they said, Pastor, these people are not going to say amen. Don't try to make them. Because if you ask them to say amen, they will for maybe 2 or 3 times. But the way they show that they're interested in what you're saying is that they're right. So if you see this, they like you. Yeah, but I can't live with looking at the tops of their heads. So, well, that's what you're going to see if God blesses you. If they're doing this, you're in trouble. If they're looking at you, you're in trouble. Now, is anybody here from Indonesia? Okay, I want somebody to validate that. So, sure enough, I got out there and started talking to them. I wanted them to just pause for a minute, look up, let me see them. Because part of my communication style is to read people's faces. I didn't see any faces, tops of heads. And I stopped her for a minute. I said, stop writing for just a minute. I love you. Please stop. Look up for a minute. I said, let me tell you something. You see what I look like? Don't we kind of look alike? And they just laughed because we did. I mean, one guy in there looked like it could have been my cousin. I said, do you know how hard it is for me to come and preach to you and you're so different, but you look like me? Because when I look at you, I expect you to act like people in North America who would look like you. And what I've got to learn is that you cannot go by appearances. That's why I start off saying that the quintessence of arrogance is to think that you can communicate with every group in the same way. You can't. When I went to North Dakota, I was challenged because really I needed to bring my decibel level down. And incidentally, this is going to shock you. I know that there are people who came up in a written tradition when I came up in an oral tradition. Okay? Neither is superior to the other, but I have to understand the difference. So I have had to learn how when I speak to certain groups, I change my progression from an oral progression, which is to say more intensity, more decibel level or less. I use it both ways. In other words, I pull out the oral progression and simply use an intellectual progression. Is that fairly clear what I'm trying to say to you? So in other words, I arrange the information so that it goes from the least impressive to the most impressive. And I can withdraw all of the oral signals. I can take them out. Because these people are not communicating based on oral signals. They're communicating based on the intellectual progression. And when I use the word intellectual, I do not intend to suggest that one is intellectual and one is not. Because when I preach to a black audience these days, I've got to have all of those elements in there. I've got to have the intellectual progression and the oral progression, because I've got people there who've got terminal degrees who are listening to me who will not respond to the oral cues without the intellectual progression. Okay? So it is a very difficult thing in America to talk to an upwardly mobile African American congregation, because you've got to have all the cues in. But you've got to learn that you can take sincerity and intensity, which translate in any culture, and add those to the intellectual progression, and you can talk to anybody. And let me tell you this, and I'm sorry for keeping on talking, you're supposed to be asking questions. The McDonald's people, who are the best predictors of what's the word I want? Market trends, but demographics is the word I was reaching for. They are telling us now that I think it's now within 7 years, there will no longer be pocket communities. Now that's my term. In other words, now you can have a majority Caucasian church. They're saying that if it's based on the community, there won't be one, because there'll be too many people mixed in every community for you to have easily assembled pocket churches. So you won't be able to have an Oriental church. Maybe the language barrier can cause it, but if the people have overcome the language barrier, you will no longer have the geographical pattern that will facilitate a church that is monolithic. Now, you need to hear what I'm saying to you, because nobody will have the luxury of speaking only to their comfort group. Are you with me? So you had better start understanding from your fellow students who are from other cultures, how do you communicate with your particular ethnic group? What is important to you? Because you will not have the luxury of saying, oh, I don't talk to those people. You're not going to be able to say that. Oh, I don't. I speak to my people. I don't talk. Let somebody else talk to them. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to have to be able to communicate with all kinds of people. Now, I believe that there will always be a predilection from an ethnic standpoint, and I don't see anything wrong with it myself. You got to remember where I came from. I'm the guy who they put out. Remember? And if I can say that so blithely, then you ought to be comfortable with it. When I was living in Mobile, Alabama, I learned that we could not go to certain Seventh-day Adventist churches. Okay? I'm telling you, if I can deal with it, you ought to get over it. I'm over it. I was at Oakwood College and in the early 60s, and we went to a certain church. Well, you know where it was. And we went there first, four of us dressed alike. We were a quartet, actually. That's why we dressed alike. And they welcomed us. Oh, come in, sing for us. You know? Well, we went back the next time. We weren't dressed alike, and we had a couple other folks with us. And then we went back with a few more, and we said, look, are you folks looking for a church? You want to worship somewhere? Because, you know, there are churches where you can go. Now, that's a hurting thing, Jack. Well, you know, in the 60s, we were a little bit more proactive than that. So now we said, oh, is that the way it is? So we got groups together and went to worship with them, and then they changed their worship time. We'd go at 11, it was over. Found out they would worship at 8 in the morning and leave. Then we found out they would worship at 3 in the afternoon. So we started getting our spies to find out when they worshiped. Because we were going to worship with these people. You know, sounds kind of silly now as I look back on it. Because if somebody doesn't want to worship with you, I don't know. But I guess it was a salvific experience for them and for us as I reflect on it. So I remember early one morning, I think it was about 6:30, we found out they were going to have Sabbath school. And I remember we were pressed into a small foyer at about 6:30 in the morning, and we were going to go worship. And one of the fine deacons, now this happened, when I write my memoirs, this will be in there. One of the fine deacons slipped at the base of my neck a piece of metal. I did not recognize this piece of metal, but it had significance. My mind went quickly through its computer banks, and metal pressed at the base of your neck. So I turned and looked, and I saw the shiny chromium barrel of a derringer from my dear brother, who was telling me, expletive deleted, you will not worship here. So, you know, I could be the one who would say, let's never get together. But folks, let me tell you something. That is foolishness. And if I allow that incident, and incidentally I could tell you a few more, to color my thinking for the rest of my life, then I am not Christian. I must learn that everybody is not like that deacon who put his derringer at the base of my neck. And I must, because of Christ, reach out to my brothers and sisters regardless of their color, because of their whatever. Amen? But I am saying to you, and I tell you all that to help you understand what I'm about to say, I think that there will still be people who draw certain others. Jose Rojas is one of the best preachers I've ever heard. He's the youth director of the North American Division. He is Mexican. Jose can speak to anybody. I arranged last year for him to go down to Oakwood and speak at the Evangelism Council. The man held folk riveted in his hand. But I believe that Jose will continue to draw extraordinary crowds from among the Hispanic population, or whichever one, whatever name I should be saying. But because that's his natural constituency. But I believe that he is effective because he can communicate to any audience. Do you understand where I'm going with it? So I don't think we can, in our minds, have the luxury of saying, I will just talk to a certain group. We must learn that the gospel must communicate across all lives. I fully expect for Breath of Life to draw people from every niche in society. I really do. I believe it because, well, based on the invitations that I get at the General Conference office, somebody thinks I can communicate to a lot of audiences. And I'm flattered by that. I just think that we've got to get out of the notion that you can be a preacher to certain segments of the church and ignore others. You cannot do that. So I've got to learn to communicate to Indonesians. Okay? Now, I love languages and all that stuff. I've learned those some interesting languages. At a meeting we had over there in I'm trying to remember this little island we were on. Anyway, I can't remember. But we had Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, and well, there were about 6 languages that they spoke. I said, I'm going to greet everybody in their language. Well, I was doing all right until we got to Cantonese and Mandarin. Which one is it that's tone? Both of them? Which one is it? Cantonese? And if you hit the wrong tone, you change the meaning, right? So the guy says, Pastor, maybe you ought not do this. I said, no, I want to do it. He said, well, if you mess up these tones, here's what it will mean. See? I said, okay, so just before I go up, would you come and rehearse the tones with me? And he did. And evidently, I didn't say anything insulting because everybody was still smiling when I got through. But I love the languages. But I think there ought to be an intellectual inquisitiveness that makes us thirsty to communicate with everybody. You know, I think it ought to be there. While you will have your natural constituency. Okay, and I've talked up all your time. I'm sorry. Give me the hard question. Where is it? There it is.
Yes, Elder Pearson, and considering what you said yesterday in regards to, I think it was the last question that was asked in the first session relating to the style of communication in this postmodern era. It seems that inductive preaching has come to a rise in the style of preaching in this day and time. And I'm just wondering, it seems to be, from all the sermons that I've heard you preach, that's a style of delivery you're very comfortable with. Narrative, inductive. 2 questions. One is, when you're doing a doctrinal sermon, how would you couch that in an inductive style? Because it tends to lend more toward deductive preaching.
Yes.
And secondly, if your style of preaching is primarily deductive, your natural style of delivery is more so deductive, how can you make the transition? Because not everyone's a good storyteller. I mean, that's just in all honesty. And we can work toward that, but how can you? And I've seen maybe 2 books. One being Lowry's book, The Homiletical Plot. But they're more descriptive rather than they're very general.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very concrete and to actually provide a good structure to go about it.
What I do in evangelism is I do mini stories, M-I-N-I. All of you know that when you're doing evangelism, you got to get the doctrine communicated. Earl Cleveland, in my estimation, is the master at evangelistic preaching. And I have heard preachers from every ilk and every ethnic group and every racial group. I just think what he does is states the proposition, gives the background information, and in that I have heard him include sometimes things from Ellen White, this, that, or the other. But then he goes anecdotal almost immediately. So he does basically, never having seen what I just put up on the board yesterday, Basically, what he does is states the premise, states the proposition, gives the proof text. That's become anathema now. You aren't even supposed to say that proof text anymore. But you got to have some Bible to substantiate what you just said. Then he goes to the anecdote, to the story, and it's a method that is hard to beat. What I do now in evangelism is that I will try to couch the whole sermon in an overarching story. But you'll come to some things that you can't do that with. Now, here's what I do when I can't. I am out of my element that I'm most comfortable with. And incidentally, I started preaching in the deductive style. Okay, my teacher was a deductive preacher. So I started that way. But what I do with that is I allow my sincerity and enthusiasm to transmit. For the last, I want to make sure I get this number right, because somebody got me on tape, and they'll get these two tapes together and say he didn't tell the truth. I think it's the last 6 evangelistic meetings that I've held. On the night I preach about tithing, somebody will return tithe right there. Because what I have done is to take off the blinders and qualifiers. Now, let me explain that. Long ago, Adventism was so unknown that Adventist evangelists had to always be putting pre-qualifiers in. In the black community, we would say, I'm going to tell you this, and you may not like it, but don't blame the mailman for the mail, or I'm just telling you had to cushion the blow. Well, I think in that time you perhaps did have to cushion it, but now things are far different. Most people know most things that are floating in the religious community. And I think now that instead of preconditioning by softening the blow, we precondition people to doubt. So I have a method now where I take off all the blinders and the preconditions and state the truth in its pristine condition with the belief that truth ought to be accepted. Now that takes some change in your head, I think, because we're all, no, they're not going to believe this. And I'm going to tell you something. I preached tithing and a couple other things, health reform. I believed that when I said you can't eat that, people would be angry. So I believe that I projected that belief that they would not believe. Okay, now that's some pretty heavy stuff, but stick with me. Preaching is not for the addled brain. So what I did consciously was take off my blinders, because I believe that the Holy Spirit accompanies truth and gives it power. And Ellen White says something like, and don't give me a quote, you'll have to look this up on the ROM if you can, if I'm quoting it closely enough. But there's something she says that resembles this, that if truth is splashed into the mind, it cannot be resisted. Now that doesn't mean you have to obey it, but you cannot resist knowing it, because truth has its own power. The American Bible Society is based on the thesis that the Bible is powerful enough by itself that if you just let somebody read it, it's got power. So what I do now is I just preach with the power of the truth. And I believe that people will believe it because it's true. And I get excited about it. And I have intentionally started projecting my excitement about truth. And I know now that people believe me way more than they did before I did that. So when I preach now health reform, nobody gets mad. And it's partly because health reform has come into currency now. But the other part is that I can tell them stuff that they still don't want to hear, but I believe they're going to believe it because it's truth. And I project belief now instead of doubt. So that's one of the things. Switching from deductive to inductive is only a stretch if you do not have the storytelling ability. And let me tell you something. We all can tell a story if we believe we can. That sounds oversimple, but it's not. Some people will never sizzle as a storyteller. I agree with you. Because they don't have enough interest in it. I believe that you can tell a story well if you are caught in it. And everybody has a story that catches them. So start with the ones that you like and shock yourself. Because I'm a natural storyteller. Because my mom was a storyteller. My dad is a storyteller. I mean, our family, it's an oral tradition. We revel in it. So it's not difficult. But there's some people who don't understand that if a story touches you, and if you can remember the elements enough to be interested in it, you will be a good storyteller, because the thing that's important to you, you will communicate. And if you start with the ones that are easy, transition is not comfortable, but it is possible. Okay? Our time is gone.